She was the daughter of a millionaire, but no doctor in the world could heal her. Every hospital, every specialist, every miracle cure, nothing worked. Her father was losing hope, ready to accept a lifetime of pain, until one day, a homeless boy appeared. And what he did next shocked everyone. Before we dive into today's story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? So drop your country in the comments below. Now let's get into one of the most emotional and unbelievable stories you'll ever hear. The sky over Manhattan that morning was washed in pale gray, the kind of color that made the tallest skyscrapers look tired. Edward Harrison sat stiffly in the back of a glossy black sedan, his hand resting on the frail shoulder of his daughter, Sophia. She was only 9 years old, but her body had shrunk into itself as though she carried the weight of centuries. Her legs, once always swinging and restless, lay lifeless under a soft blue blanket. Her golden hair fell in a straight curtain over her pale face. She stared out of the tinted window, not seeing the city that blurred past. Edward adjusted his cufflinks for the third time that morning. His suit was perfect. His tie knotted with precision, yet nothing could hide the exhaustion in his eyes. He had built companies, brokered billion-dollar deals, and survived Wall Street crashes with ruthless composure. But when it came to his daughter, he was powerless. He had taken Sophia to every specialist the world could offer, neurosurgeons in Switzerland, child rehabilitation experts in Boston, holistic healers in India. Each time he had returned with a little less hope. The verdict never changed. Permanent damage, no cure. Prepare for lifelong care. The driver pulled into the courtyard of the Harrison mansion, a stone estate that looked like a fortress of success. The iron gates swung open, the gardens trimmed with military precision. Yet to Edward, the house was nothing but a silent prison. No laughter, no footsteps running down the hall, only echoing silence. Sophia's wheelchair squeaked softly as Edward guided her through the marble foyer. His late wife's portrait still hung above the grand staircase. Elena, smiling in oil paint, forever 35. She had died 3 years earlier, long before Sophia fell ill. Sometimes Edward wondered if his daughter's sickness had been a silent response to that loss. "Daddy," Sophia whispered as they entered the living room. Her voice was like tissue paper, fragile and easy to tear. "Yes, Angel? Why do the doctors always look at me like I'm already gone?" Edward froze. His throat tightened as he crouched beside her chair. He wanted to say something comforting, but the truth was he had noticed it too. The pity in the doctor's eyes, the quiet resignation. "They don't know you," he said finally, forcing a smile. "They see numbers on a chart. I see my daughter, and you're still here." Sophia looked at him, her big hazel eyes searching for something she could no longer find in herself. Hope. Later that week, Edward did something unusual. Instead of driving Sophia home after another grim hospital appointment, he stopped at Riverside Park. "Why here?" she asked softly. "Because you need to breathe air that doesn't smell like disinfectant." He wheeled her down the gravel path. Families picnicked under the trees. Children raced with kites. The Hudson River glittered under the afternoon sun. Edward thought the sight might lift Sophia's spirits, but she sat slumped, her eyes dull. And then it happened. "Hey," the voice came from the grass nearby. Edward turned. A boy, no older than 10, stood barefoot on the path. His skin was dark, his t-shirt faded and too big for his thin frame. A worn-out backpack hung from one shoulder. He smiled as though the world had never managed to beat it out of him. Sophia blinked, caught off guard. "Hi," she answered, her voice timid. The boy walked closer, ignoring Edward's guarded stare. "I'm Malik," he said simply. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she murmured. Malik crouched beside her wheelchair, his eyes bright. "Pretty name. Want to play?" Edward stiffened. His instinct screamed stranger danger. But before he could intervene, Sophia whispered, "I can't." She tugged at the blanket covering her useless legs. Malik tilted his head, his expression curious, not pitying. "You've still got hands, right?" Sophia nodded slowly. "Then you can play." He held out his own small hand, palm open, waiting. For the first time in months, Sophia hesitated for something other than pain. She looked at her father, then back at Malik. His grin was disarming, like sunlight peeking through storm clouds. Carefully, she placed her hand in his. Malik squeezed gently. "See? Easy. Now follow me." He began tapping a rhythm on her palm. 2 taps, a pause, then 1 more. Sophia frowned, then mimicked it. Malik laughed, clapping his hands together. "You're good. Faster now." Her lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. Edward stood frozen. He hadn't seen that expression on her face in over a year. Something stirred deep inside his chest. Something dangerously close to hope. The game continued. Malik turned it into a sequence of claps, knuckle bumps, and hand flips. Sophia giggled when she missed a beat. Edward felt his knees weaken at the sound. His daughter's laughter, real, unguarded laughter, cut through the heavy air that had suffocated. "They're home for so long. You're cheating," Sophia accused, eyes sparkling. "Nope," Malik said proudly. "You're just too slow." She tried harder, her small hands moving with surprising energy. Her wheelchair shifted slightly forward from her own effort. Edward's heart skipped a beat. Malik leaned in, lowering his voice. "Bet you can move." "This thing all by yourself." Sophia glanced down at the wheels. I haven't in a long time." "Try," he said, steady and confident. "I'll be right here." Her tiny fingers gripped the wheels. Her arms trembled. For a moment, Edward wanted to stop her, afraid of disappointment, but Malik's steady gaze gave her courage. Slowly, painfully, she pushed the wheels forward a few inches. Edward's breath caught. "I did it," Sophia whispered, her eyes wide. "Told you," Malik grinned. "You're stronger than you think." And for the first time in a long time, Sophia believed it. As the sun dipped lower, Edward finally found his voice. He crouched beside them, his tone gentler than he intended. "Where are your parents, Malik?" The boy shrugged. "Don't have any. Been on my own for a while, but it's okay, I manage." Sophia's small hand clutched his. "Daddy, he's my friend." Edward stared at the boy, ragged, homeless, yet somehow glowing with a strength no doctor had ever shown. He didn't know why, but he felt it too. This boy was different, and in that moment, a seed of change was planted, one that would soon grow into a miracle. The autumn air had a crisp bite the next time Edward and Sophia returned to Riverside Park. The trees along the path had begun to blush with shades of orange and gold, and the breeze carried the earthy smell of fallen leaves. Edward hadn't planned on coming back. He had meetings stacked, business partners demanding answers, investors pressing for updates. But all of that faded when he remembered the sound of Sophia's laughter 2 days ago. Laughter pulled out of her by a ragged boy. With nothing but bare feet and a smile, Sophia insisted, of course. The moment she woke, she whispered, "Daddy, can we go back to the park? Maybe Malik will be there." Edward hesitated, but when he saw the light flicker in her hazel eyes, the same light that had been extinguished for months, he couldn't say no. They didn't have to wait long. Malik appeared from behind the row of benches, his backpack slung across one shoulder, his shirt patched with frayed seams. His face broke into a grin when he spotted Sophia. "You came back," he said, running toward them. "Told you I would," Sophia answered, her voice stronger than usual. Edward stood behind the wheelchair, studying him closely. Malik was all bones and energy, a child weathered by hardship but glowing with something unexplainable. Resilience, maybe even defiance. The boy crouched down, eye level with Sophia. "Want to finish our game?" "Yes," she chirped, extending her hand. Edward watched as their palms clapped together in a rhythm too quick for him to follow. Sophia giggled each time she missed, and Malik teased her mercilessly. The scene made something ache in Edward's chest, envy maybe. He had all the resources in the world, Yet this barefoot child had managed to do what no specialist could: give his daughter joy. After nearly an hour of laughter, Malik sat cross-legged on the grass. His chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes stayed bright. Sophia leaned forward in her chair, curious. "Where do you live, Malik?" she asked. The boy shrugged. "All over, sometimes under the bridge, sometimes in a shelter if they've got space. Mostly the streets." Edward's jaw tightened. He knew the city was merciless, but to hear it so casually from a child, it unsettled him. "You're homeless?" Sophia whispered. "Yeah," Malik said, with the nonchalance of someone who had long accepted it. "But it's not so bad. The stars look better when you sleep outside." Sophia frowned. "But aren't you cold? Or scared?" Malik's smile faltered for the first time. He plucked at a loose thread on his backpack. "Sometimes, but my mom used to say fear is just a shadow. It can't hurt you if you keep walking." Edward leaned closer. "Your mother?" Malik nodded. "She got sick last year. Real sick. We couldn't afford the hospital. One day, she just didn't wake up." His voice cracked, but he quickly covered it with a grin. "Since then, it's just me." Silence fell between them. Sophia's eyes shimmered with tears, and Edward felt his throat tighten. The boy had lost everything, yet somehow he radiated strength. "How do you keep smiling?" Sophia asked softly. Malik thought for a moment. "Because if I stop, I lose. And I don't like losing." He grinned again, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Besides, the world already expects me to give up. I like proving it wrong." Edward's gaze lingered on him. He couldn't decide whether the boy was naive or wise beyond his years. Perhaps both. Over the next week, Malik became a fixture in their days. Whenever Edward brought Sophia to the park, Malik would appear, sometimes carrying a stick he had carved into a toy sword, other times juggling apples he'd found at a vendor's stall. He had a knack for making Sophia forget her wheelchair. He turned her blanket into a superhero cape, her armrests into royal thrones, her hands into instruments for clapping songs. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in shades of lavender, Edward watched something extraordinary. Malik convinced Sophia to try a warrior game. "Here's how it goes," he explained, kneeling beside her chair. "I'll clap once and you try to push your wheel just an inch. Just one. Then I'll clap again and you push another inch. Got it?" Sophia bit her lip. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to know," Malik replied. "You just have to try." Edward opened his mouth to object, but Malik clapped sharply before he could. Sophia's hands hovered uncertainly over the wheels. Then slowly they pushed. The chair inched forward. Malik whooped like she had just won a marathon. "See? You're a warrior!" Sophia giggled, cheeks flushed. Again, they repeated it, inch by inch, clap by clap. Edward's heart thundered as he realized something incredible. His daughter was moving herself. When they stopped, Sophia leaned back, panting. "That was hard. That was amazing," Malik said firmly. "You're stronger than you think." Edward crouched beside her, his voice trembling. "Sophia, do you feel pain?" She shook her head. "No, Daddy. I feel alive." Edward had to look away, his eyes burning. That evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep in her chair on the ride home, Edward stared out of the car window, lost in thought. He had hired the best physical therapists, each session costing more than most families earned in a month. Yet none of them had managed to coax this kind of progress. None of them had sparked this kind of determination. It wasn't medical, it wasn't technical. It was something deeper. A belief. A boy with nothing had given his daughter what money could not. Hope. The next day, Edward lingered after Sophia, dozed in her chair beneath a tree. Malik sat nearby, humming a tune while carving a twig with a pocket knife. "Malik," Edward said quietly. The boy looked up, alert but unafraid. "You know, you're doing something no one else has been able to do for my daughter." Malik shrugged. I just remind her she's not broken. People treat her like she can't do anything. I treat her like she can. Edward studied him. Do you believe she'll walk again? Malik didn't hesitate. Yes. The certainty in his voice startled Edward. He wanted to dismiss it as childish optimism, but a part of him, a part that had been buried under despair, wanted to believe too. Malik leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. Doctor said my mom wouldn't last more than 2 months. She made it almost a year. Every day she'd say, impossible is just a word, not a wall. He paused, eyes softening. I think Sophia's got that same fight. She just needs someone to remind her. Edward swallowed hard. The boy's words pierced deeper than any polished doctor's report. And for the first time in months, Edward allowed himself to wonder, what if Malik was right? The days stretched into weeks, and each time Edward brought Sophia to Riverside Park, Malik was waiting, as though the boy had an invisible tether that pulled him to her. The three of them settled into a strange rhythm. Edward with his quiet watchfulness, Sophia with her growing spark, and Malik with his endless supply of hope. But on a chilly afternoon in late October, Malik arrived with a new kind of determination in his eyes. Sophia noticed it immediately. You look serious today, she said, adjusting the blanket over her lap. That's because today's different, Malik replied, crouching until his eyes were level with hers. Today we're not just playing games, today we're going to try something big. Edward stiffened behind the wheelchair. What do you mean, big? Malik glanced up at him, then back at Sophia. She's ready to do more than sit and clap. She can push herself now, she can balance the next step. He paused for effect. His standing. Edward's breath caught. The word felt dangerous, almost blasphemous. Standing was something doctors had told them to forget forever. Absolutely not, Edward said sharply. She could get hurt, she could fall. Then I'll catch her, Malik interrupted, his voice steady. Mr. Harrison, I know you're scared, but she's stronger than you think. Let her try. Sophia's hazel eyes flicked between them, wide and hopeful. Daddy, please, just once. If I fall, it's okay. I want to try. Edward looked at her, really looked. For months, she had been quiet, withdrawn, almost lifeless. Now she was pleading, alive with determination. He felt something inside him crack. He exhaled, defeated. One attempt, that's all. Sophia beamed. Malik's grin stretched ear to ear. They wheeled her closer to a sturdy bench under a sprawling oak tree. The golden leaves shivered in the breeze, scattering like confetti around them. Malik positioned himself in front of her chair, his hands ready. Okay, Sophia, he said softly. Here's what we'll do. Put your hands on the armrests. When I count to 3, lean forward and push yourself up. I'll hold your arms so you don't fall. You don't have to stay up long. Just stand for 1 breath. Sophia's fingers trembled as they curled around the armrests. Her lips pressed together, fear flashing across her face. What if I can't? She whispered. Malik leaned closer, his voice firm but gentle. Then you can't yet. But what if you can? Don't think about failing. Think about standing, for 1 second. For you. Edward swallowed hard, his chest tight. 1. Malik's voice was calm, steady as stone. 2. Sophia's eyes closed, her body tense. 3. With a cry that was half effort, half fear, Sophia pushed down on the armrests. Her arms shook violently, her face twisted with strain. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a trembling gasp, her legs shifted, her body lifted. Edward's eyes widened in disbelief. She was rising. Malik gripped her arms, steadying her. Yes, you're doing it, Sophia. You're standing. Her knees wobbled, but they locked. Her body straightened. And then, impossibly, miraculously, she was upright. The entire park seemed to hold its breath. Sophia's eyes flew open. She looked down at her feet, both planted firmly on the ground. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, Daddy, I'm standing. Edward dropped to his knees, choking back sobs. His daughter, the child doctors had called hopeless, was towering above him, alive, defiant. "Don't let go yet," she begged Malik, her voice trembling. "I won't," Malik promised. "But feel it. This is you. Not the doctors, not me, not your dad, you." For 3 glorious seconds, Sophia stood on her own 2 feet. Then her legs buckled. She gasped, pitching forward, but Malik caught her instantly, lowering her gently back into the chair. Edward surged forward, gripping her hands. "Sophia, that was... you were..." His voice cracked into silence. She laughed through her tears, her whole body trembling. "I did it, Daddy, I really did it." Edward kissed her forehead, tears spilling freely now. "You did. My angel. You did." Malik sat cross-legged on the ground, panting as though he had been the one to lift himself. But his eyes were shining. "Told you," he said simply. From that day forward, everything changed. Sophia begged for warrior training every time they came to the park. Malik turned their sessions into playful challenges, balancing upright, for 2 breaths instead of 1, shifting her weight from 1 foot to the other, even trying to take the tiniest steps while holding his hands. Each attempt left her exhausted, but the fire in her eyes burned brighter. Edward watched in awe. The girl who had stopped smiling now laughed at her own wobbles. The child who once refused to leave her bed now demanded trips to the park. Malik's faith was contagious, not only for Sophia but for Edward too. One afternoon, Sophia managed to take a single step while gripping Malik's shoulders. The movement was clumsy, shaky, but it was a step. Edward's hand flew to his mouth. He couldn't breathe. His daughter's legs had moved. Sophia gasped, exhilarated. "Did you see, Daddy? Did you see?" "I saw," Edward whispered hoarsely. "I'll never forget it." Later that night, Edward stood in his study, the city lights glittering beyond the window. He stared at the shelves of medical files, each folder stamped with the word incurable. He thought of the millions he had spent, the specialist who had looked him in the eye and said, "Give up." And then he thought of Malik, a boy with no shoes, no parents, no home, pulling miracles from thin air with nothing but belief. Edward's hand trembled against the window pane. For the first time in over a year, the future didn't look like a locked door. It looked like a path, uncertain but possible. Down the hall, Sophia's giggles echoed faintly. Malik had stayed for dinner that night, entertaining her with stories about racing imaginary dragons on rooftops. The sound was so foreign, so beautiful, Edward had to steady himself against the wall just to breathe it in. Maybe, just maybe, the impossible was no longer impossible. Winter arrived quietly, draping the city in frost. The Harrison mansion's tall windows fogged with condensation, and fireplaces that had once burned only for show now filled the halls with a warm, living glow. Edward stood in the doorway of Sophia's room one crisp December morning, his breath catching as he watched what was unfolding. The sun spilled golden across the carpet. Sophia was standing, upright, with both hands braced on the back of a chair. Malik stood a foot away, his palms hovering near her, not holding her, just watching, ready to catch her if she stumbled. "Okay," Malik said softly, his voice filled with calm authority. "Shift your left foot forward. Just a little." Like stepping into a puddle, Sophia bit her lip, determination burning in her hazel eyes. Slowly, shakily, her left leg dragged forward. "Yes," Malik cheered. "Now the right one. Just breathe." Her right foot followed. 2 steps. Then 3. Edward's knees buckled as tears blurred his vision. His little girl, once imprisoned in her chair, was moving across the room. Sophia laughed through her effort. "Daddy, I'm walking." Edward staggered forward, his voice breaking. "Yes, Angel. Yes, you are." She reached the edge of the carpet and collapsed into Malik's waiting arms. He steadied her, beaming like a brother. "Not bad for a morning workout," Malik teased. "Not bad," Sophia giggled breathlessly. "That was amazing." Edward's hand pressed against his chest as he whispered, "Thank you, God." Thank you. The days that followed were a blur of transformation. Sophia grew stronger with every attempt. First, it was 5 steps, then 10. By Christmas, she could cross the living room while clutching Malik's hand. Edward, who had once filled his calendar with board meetings and power lunches, now canceled appointments just to be home for training time. He couldn't tear himself away from the miracle unfolding before his eyes, and Malik, the boy with nothing, had become indispensable. He wasn't just Sophia's companion. He was her coach, her cheerleader, her protector. But Edward also noticed the shadows in Malik's eyes when the nights grew colder. Malik never complained, but Edward knew. Once dinner ended and the mansion quieted, Malik would slip back onto the streets, curled in some corner of the city, his backpack for a pillow. It gnawed at Edward's conscience. One evening, after tucking Sophia into bed, Edward found Malik sitting alone by the kitchen window sipping hot chocolate. The boy's thin shoulders hunched against the glow of the stove. "Malik," Edward said softly, pulling out a chair across from him. The boy looked up, his expression guarded. "Yeah?" Edward folded his hands. "I need to ask you something. Why do you help her? Really?" Malik blinked, then shrugged. "Because she reminds me of my mom. Not the sick part, the strong part. My mom used to smile even when she hurt. Sophia's got that same fight. I just don't want her to forget it." Edward swallowed the lump in his throat. "You've given her more than any doctor or therapist. You've given her her life back. And in doing that, you've given me mine back too." Malik shifted uncomfortably, not used to praise. "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did." Edward's voice cracked. "You did the impossible." Silence lingered between them, heavy but warm. Then Edward leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Malik, I don't want you to go back to the streets. Not tonight. Not ever again. This is your home now, if you'll have it." Malik's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me." Edward's voice trembled, but his conviction was clear. "You're family now. Sophia calls you her brother. And I need you here too. Let me give you what you've given us. Hope, safety, a future." For the first time, Malik's bravado cracked. His lips trembled, his eyes filling with tears. He tried to blink away. "No one's ever wanted me before," he whispered. Edward reached across the table, placing his hand firmly on the boy's. "We do. Sophia and I both do. Please, Malik, stay." Malik swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll stay." The following morning, Sophia awoke to find Malik still there, asleep on the couch under a real blanket for the first time in months. She squealed with joy and threw her arms around him. "You're not leaving?" she asked. "Not anymore." Malik smiled, ruffling her hair. Edward watched them from the doorway, his chest swelling with a feeling he hadn't known in years. Wholeness. By spring, the mansion was alive again. Sophia could walk short distances unassisted, her steps wobbly but proud. Malik attended a private school Edward had enrolled him in, but he still spent afternoons coaching Sophia through warrior drills. The house that once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, footsteps, and even arguments over who got the bigger slice of cake. One bright April afternoon, Edward stood on the balcony overlooking the garden. Below him, Sophia ran. Actually, Farcient across the grass, her golden hair flying in the wind. Malik chased after her, both of them laughing breathlessly. Edward's vision blurred as tears streamed down his cheeks. His daughter, once confined to a chair, was free. And the boy who had walked into their lives with nothing had given them everything. Edward whispered to himself, his voice trembling with gratitude. This is the real miracle." That evening, as they gathered around the dinner table, Sophia clasped Malik's hand tightly. "You're my brother now," she declared firmly. Malik chuckled. "Guess I don't get a choice, huh?" "Nope," she grinned. Forever. Edward raised his glass of water, his voice steady and full of love. To Sophia for her courage, to Malik for his heart, and to family, because sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect, but the ones who simply believe. They clinked glasses, and in that moment, Edward knew. Wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or mansions. It was measured in laughter, in courage, in love. And thanks to a homeless boy with nothing but hope, his family had been reborn.
Tales for tomorrow. Tales for tomorrow. Tales for